so lucky to have this conversation. I'd like you to join me in welcoming our guests. Rafe, what do you think is the biggest difference in the world and on this topic now as opposed to the 1970s?
One is that when I started working on this, nobody ever heard of the problem. 1979, people in Congress, nothing. There was zero recognition. Now there's total recognition globally. So that's over 4 decades. And I think the advance in the recognition recently is huge because one of the other changes is that many of the impacts that were forecast in those assessments at that time have come to pass. We're now seeing climate change, the forecast still in the windshield, but we're seeing impacts in the rearview mirror.
The entire world has come along, basically. The entire world has gotten on board, basically. There was a lot of talk that's become much more reality now. Every country in the world is signed up to this Paris thing. Everyone at least has these sort of titular goals. Certainly, no one's doing what they need to be doing, and some are doing a lot more than others, but almost the sort of argument against action or the argument for inaction has almost faded away entirely, except for one small pocket of the world, namely the US Republican Party.
That has held the United States back from global leadership. And we need to be out there as a nation, and the Congress can't do anything because really the big options have to be done in a bipartisan way, particularly carbon pricing. If I'm a climate negotiator these days, I was one once, I had the same problem, but we didn't quite understand it. You cannot go to the international community and say, we, the United States, plan to do this as a representative from the State Department, because you have to have implementing legislation if you're going to make any kind of serious commitment. So unless the Congress has given you implementing legislation, it's really a crapshoot when you go to the negotiations whether you can live up to the kind of commitments you'd like to make. If I would not take the job that I once had,
Right.
Because I don't know how do you show up, particularly if you're a part of a progressive government, because you know that whatever you commit to is problematic whether you can get the Congress to do it. Here's the place of leverage. It's called Florida. Why is Florida the most important place in the country, maybe the world, on climate change? But Florida is existentially threatened by sea level rise. It's threatened by more intense hurricanes. Its corals are dying, or have died. But just the sea level rise issue alone threatens the tax base of Florida, threatens the landscape of Florida, threatens the water table of Florida. So well, Florida is the most important political state in our country. Sea level rise will decide the election of 2020 because the issue has become big enough down there, it's possible. Arizona is the same way, massive impacts, marginal purple state. So if you can move the purple states, the Republicans have to shift. And we've actually seen amongst Florida politicians, the leading advocates of carbon tax in the Republican Party are, guess where they're from? Sea level rise city down there, right? In Florida. A guy from Naples, Francis Rooney, big proponent. We see some shifts down there because sea level rise is actually happening. It's visible, impactful, and there is a massive shift going on within local governments because they have to deal with this.
I want to know what you guys think can be done with Republicans.
To the reactionary mind, climate change is not a call to sort of cosmopolitan global cooperation, but the opposite. It is a call to put up walls, to keep out climate migrants, to hoard resources while they're still available, to live like a lifeboat.
And that's a great answer because it turns me into an optimist. Now, who here wants to buy Greenland? Anybody? Are you willing to put out your tax money into Greenland? No.
Pretty nice.
But Greenland is central to our future. Why is that? Well, because Greenland ice sheet has 24 feet of sea level rise in it once it all melts. And if we don't do anything, it will all melt. And it will impact multiple generations, and it will get worse and worse and worse. Now, Antarctica is bigger. I wrote an op-ed piece, it was published by the Orlando Sun-Sentinel, about this, and I suggested that Trump use his free time, now that he wasn't going to Denmark to buy Greenland, that he go to Greenland and go on the ice sheet and see what's happening, because a lot of politicians are taken to Greenland, so it's one of the great learning experiences on the planet. For the United States, the game, Greenland is terribly important to our future. And in our campaign, we say, the fate of Greenland is the fate of Miami, the fate of Jacksonville, the fate of Tampa. And for Lindsey Graham, we say it's the fate of Charleston, South Carolina. But seriously, Greenland will take out cities across the world. So part of our policy would be, what is necessary to stop Greenland from shrinking? That is a U.S. national strategic goal, or ought to be. It isn't. We got to bring them along, though. And the strategy for bringing them along is impact-based. What's happening in your locality? Why is it happening? And you got to deal with it. And sea level rise is one of those impacts where you can bring people along. One other path is through the word innovation, because innovation isn't a bad word in the Republican Party. And you can build a whole policy around innovation. One, R&D, massive increase in R&D. Two, pricing, which drives innovation as well as reductions. As distressed as we are, we have to keep thinking of ways to bring them in, because there's some things we cannot do without bipartisan support.
What do you think has changed in the position, if anything, of the oil majors and the rest of the fossil fuel sector over these last decades? And what do you think needs to be the public and public policy's attitude towards the fossil fuel sector?
I think they've come around to the idea that climate policy is inevitable, and that the amount of carbon that the IPCC reports talk about burying dwarfs the amount of oil and gas that is now handled by the industry by like 4x. So if anything, it's a bigger potential industry that they could have their hands on. They've already got a lot of the infrastructure built. So I think coal is screwed. The oil majors, I think, see a path forward where they could profit in this world, which I think is one of the reasons they've dropped their sort of across the board kind of denialism and opposition, and now are more kind of angling to get the policies they want.
We need them. The amount of innovation, carbon sequestration, the amount of power in U.S. industry that has to be brought to bear to deal with this on time. I mean, we're late now. But if we're going to beat this problem, beat catastrophe, it has to be the entire society on board. This generational challenge where people's children and grandchildren face a warmer and warmer planet, and where the consequences are becoming clearer and clearer and more evident.
If there was a World War II style mobilization, what would Company X do differently than it's doing now? The answer was, we were part of the World War II mobilization. We delivered everything the government told us they would pay for. We invented everything the government told us they needed. And if the government would be so serious about climate change as to make us a similar proposition, we know how to sequester, we know how to do biofuels, they are not economic now under current market conditions, but if they will buy it, we will sell them all they want.
So we got the threat. Now we need the leadership. You need to point to a goal. And the goal is not amorphous. The goal has to be an amount of radiative forcing that is safe. Not so easy to decide, but you got to pick a number. So I'm saying pick a number, build a strategic plan that is global in nature to get there. That's the challenge. And then you got to bring all the pieces together.
The corporates, as you say, are perfectly willing to make money however there is money to be made. They are less ideological, but the Republican Party has become deeply ideological and has sort of created this ideological head of steam that is in a large sense even immune to reservations from what used to be their constituents. I actually think we'll have corporate cooperation before we'll have Republican cooperation.
Hi. Y'all have tossed around the word innovation a lot. And I'm very interested to bring it back to the energy policy then and now. Where have we seen innovation impact policy specifically in the past, and where can we expect to see it impact now, or what's upcoming?
Technologies move along the cost and experience curve, right? And so where they are on that curve dictates what policy is going to help innovate, right? So early research, you need basic research, right? Basic R&D money. And then, sort of like as they start to stand up and become commercialized, then you want standards, performance standards. Like performance standards in California, for instance, if you're looking for a great innovation story, performance standards are responsible for a huge chunk of the reason Californians use less energy than other people in the US, and they've cut refrigerator energy consumption by 100th or something like that. So performance standards are magic, they're great. Innovation in the economy almost always traces back to government policy. It's not that government policy can do it, it's that government policy is usually what does it.
Look back at the Obama stimulus plan. Biggest expenditures ever for solar energy. How did that work? Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker of the House. She calls up Ernie Moniz at MIT, who became Secretary of Energy. Say, Ernie, how much money you want in this bill for solar power? $2 billion. Done. Boom. That's how policy works.
And look at the prices of solar and wind after 2008. It's a very, it's unmistakable the effect that the stimulus had. I just don't know how it's an argument anymore about whether government can do this. Government has done it in multiple times in living memory not that long ago.
We have to call this to an end. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. Thank you very much, and thank you to our host.